أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أأنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون أَإِتَّخِذُ مِن دُونِهِ آلِهَةً إِن يُرِدْنِ الرَّحْمَنُ بِضُرٍّ لَّا تُغْنِ عَنِّي شَفَاعَتُهُمْ شَيْئًا وَلَا يُنقِذُونِ إِنِّي إِذًا لَّفِي ضَلَالٍ مُّبِينٍ إِنِّي آمَنتُ بِرَبِّكُمْ فاسمعون صدق الله العلي العظيم وصل يا ربي على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين.
Ahsant, Brother Mehdi. Wonderful job reciting. Let's give him another loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. I seek refuge from the accursed shaitan, and I begin in the name of Allah, the entirely merciful, the especially merciful, and I ask him to send the best of his blessings on the best of his creations, the Holy Prophet Muhammad and his immaculate progeny. Blessings be to them all. Salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Respected scholars, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'd like to welcome you all to the Islamic Center of America for our 6th night of the UNI Ashura program. Each night we begin at 9:30 p.m. Each night begins as follows with a Quran recitation, followed by our wonderful speakers, Sheikh Ibrahim Kazerooni and Sheikh Mehdi Hazari. Before I begin, I would like to just kindly remind everyone COVID-19 is still very relevant in our lives today, so we please ask that you wear a mask while we are here. Try to remain social distance as much as possible. Wash your hands, use hand sanitizer when needed, just so we all can remain safe and healthy and can continue to come together to commemorate Imam Hussein and remember those who suffered in Karbala. So we are about halfway through our programs during Ashura. So we like to hear feedback from our audience. A lot of you have been coming every night. We appreciate all your input and opinions. So we will be sending out in our announcements group chat on WhatsApp a link where you can fill out a survey on what you have thought about the programs, the good or the bad. We appreciate constructive criticism as well. So we'll be sending that in there. You can also find it on, you will be able to find it tonight, inshallah, on our UNI Instagram page at UNI.org. And you can also visit our page if you would like to sponsor any of our Ashura nightly programs. Or you can come up to me or Brother Anwar, Sister Malak. We can let you know how you can go about that. On behalf of tonight's sponsor, they ask that you please all recite Surah Al-Fatiha for the late Hajj Maryam Bazi, Ali Yarhamah. Ba'd salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you all. Now, tonight's topic is am I truly free or am I enslaved by my choices? And to start us off with that topic, we have one of our resident scholars here, Sheikh Ibrahim Kazerooni. Please help me welcome him with a loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء سيدنا ونبينا حبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى آله الطاهرين وصحبه المنتجبين. Let's go back to the story of 2 nights ago. So that didn't sound the way it should. So could I have the second salawat? A third one will be better. Mulana Hazari, sisters and brothers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. يقول الله تبارك وتعالى في القرآن الكريم: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وقل الحق من ربكم فمن شاء فليؤمن ومن شاء فليكفر. إنا أعتدنا للظالمين نارا أحاط بهم سرادقها. Surah Al-Kahf, verse 29. And say, the truth is from your Lord, has been explained. Whoever wants to believe, they may, and whoever wants to reject and deny, again, it's up to them. We have prepared for the unjust a fire whose tent will envelop them. The topic chosen, or the theme chosen for tonight's conversation, I'm sure Maulana Hazari is going to spend more time on it. What I'm going to say, or briefly unpack it, is what is considered to be a crash course in early Islamic kalam, or theology. The notion of free will. Am I free, really free, to decide for myself? And how much is that freedom affects my future? Or am I compelled, programmed, predetermined that by desire of Allah to behave certain ways? Has been one of the early discussions, one of the themes and concepts that from early history of Islam, theologians, particularly in the Sunni field, spent huge amount of time on it. The presence of the Shia Imam certainly helped the scholars, that wherever there was a conflict or something that they did not understand, they could go to the Imam and get clarification. But for the Ahl Sunnah, that the concept of Sunnah was purely defined within the context of the Holy Prophet, certainly it became an issue. The problem was this freedom, whether we are compelled or not, became somehow an addendum to the concept of divine justice. As they unpacked the concept of divine justice, a number of peripheral ideas and notions came, that one of them was the debate on the issue whether we are free or not. For the Sunni scholars, the presence of a number of verses in the Holy Quran made it very difficult for them, because they consider these to be somehow contradictory or antithetical. When you look at some of these verses, clearly outline that you have freedom, humans have freedom to choose and decide for themselves. Yet, there are other verses in the Holy Quran that says otherwise. So for them, the difficult point was which one to choose and which one to interpret. Two schools of thoughts evolved within the Sunni school of theology and kalam. Later on, originally they were Qadaris and Jabris, and later on they became Ash'a'iras and Mu'tazilas. Now, like everything else, now we have the neo-Ash'aris and neo-Mu'tazilis, in the same way that we have neo-Marxists and neo-capitalists. So these are the old formulation of Ash'ari and Mu'tazili suffered a number of shortcomings. So they had to revive it and adjust it to a degree and fine-tune it. But the fundamental problem remained the same. These two groups, once they have accepted that what appeared to be on the surface antithetical verses in the Holy Quran, they had to accept certain verses of the Holy Quran and somehow try to interpret the other part. Let me just give you a few from each group. إِنَّا هَدَيْنَاهُ السَّبِيلَ إِمَّا شَاكِرًا وَإِمَّا كَفُورًا. We provided humans with a frame of guidance. They have the choice whether they want to follow or not. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُوا مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ. The destiny is in the human hand. You want to change your destiny, you have to decide and you have to change. This verse that I started in Surah Al-Kahf, وَقُلِ الْحَقُّ مِنْ رَبِّكُمْ فَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمِنْ وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفُرْ. Whoever wants to accept and whoever wants to reject. ظهر الفساد في البر والبحر بما كسبت أيدي الناس. If there are problems, challenges, calamities, at least most of it we have to search in human behavior. These at least 4 verses clearly indicate that we as human beings have total freedom to decide for ourselves. Yet, فَيُضِلُّ اللَّهُ مَنْ يَشَاءُ وَيَهْدِي مَنْ يَشَاءُ. Now, it's the opposite, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides whomever Allah wishes and misguides, the literal, if we were to remain within the literal interpretation, and misguides whomever this Allah wishes. إِنَّا كُلُّ شَيْءٍ خَلَقْنَاهُ بِقَدَرٍ. Everything is predetermined and clearly defined. قَدْ جَعَلَ اللَّهُ لِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدَرًا or قَدْرًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has formulated everything within some frame of reference. And few others. So for these people, looking at some of these verses, they had to go through what we call it today, a gymnastic. Should we accept the verses that clearly identified I'm free to decide my own destiny and my own will and behavior, or is it Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who is in command and my role is nothing more than a role of a robot that is programmed to behave in a particular manner? Now, if this wasn't enough, the confusion that was created in the early, at least the debate about divine justice started the latter part of the 1st century and then went back to the early 2nd century. If it wasn't enough in the whole debate, scholarly debate and theological debate, or ilm al-kalam, politics came into it. Now we have Ibn al-Abbas, some of them are intrinsically, for them it really didn't matter whether it was Jabr or ikhtiyar. For them, they used it as a way to create discontent from the society, divide and rule. Thousands of lives were lost during the early part. In the same manner, there was another issue that the Christianity suffered from it, whether Kalam, Quran was created or eternal. We want to leave that for some another time, probably when we discuss the whole issue of Quran tomorrow night and the night after. But once politics came into the whole thing, they stirred up and created huge amount of discontent. From there, we see that this debate somehow gets into tafasir and commentaries on the Holy Quran. Scholars, that they are Jabris, the entire tafsir represent or reflects that mindset, that we are not free. We are pre-programmed. Here we see, for example, Tafsir Imam Fakhr al-Razi is one of the classic examples. On the other hand, Kashaf, Imam Zamakhshari, he's a Mu'tazili and claims that no, we have free will. As I said, this is a very brief discussion about it, because otherwise we have to go into detail, and it becomes too much for people who have no, at least some foundational course in Islamic Kalam. So one group says we are free, but the concept of freedom that they talk about is the clockmaker in the Christian tradition, that God has created. Somehow the clockmaker makes the clock, starts functioning, then removes his hand or her hand from it. Somehow inherently the clock continues functioning. The freedom that Mu'tazilis talked about is this type of freedom. Allah has nothing to do with us after it has created us. We are predisposed with the idea that we are inherently programmed to be free. Allah created us, and that's it. On the other hand, the Jabris or the Ash'ara said, no, there is no such thing. Allah is in full control. Now, one of the questions that Shia scholars posed against both of these is that for those in particular that consider, opted the Ash'ara, that considered that we have no freedom, the question was, and we see this even during the time of Amir al-Mu'mineen, salawatullah salam alayhi. There is a hadith in Tawheed al-Saduq, Bab al-Qada wal-Qadar. Hadith is narrated from Amir al-Mu'mineen. When the person is asking, am I free or am I predisposed to do certain thing? Imam rejects the notion of predisposing. He says, لو كان كذلك لبطل الثواب والعقاب. The whole notion of reward and punishment only makes sense when you are free to decide for yourself. Otherwise, if I am predisposed and predetermined, and Allah is the one who has the remote control, so to speak, and Allah is the one who guides me around, so why am I being punished or rewarded? The same kind of theme comes within a hadith from Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq salawatullah salam alayhi. Allahu a'dalu min an yajbura abdan ala fi'lin thumma yu'adhibuhu. Divine justice is much wider and should be better understood than to believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to force a servant to do certain thing and then punish him for this. The famous debate between Tusi and Umar al-Khayyam regarding this Jabr and Tafwid, you read it in Kutub and books of Kalam. What happened to the third option that again narrated from Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, a hadith, لا جبر ولا تفويض بل أمر بين الأمرين. The Shia introduce a plane. Rather than purely designate the power of Allah to be supreme, they have divided it into what we call the macro level and the micro level, for the use of a better thing. We are free in the micro level concept, because otherwise there was no meaning for taklif. And at the same time, this micro level is within the greater schema of things, the vertical power of that Allah has on everything. And if you just take some time and read this in books of Kalam, go to alislam.org and put in Jabr and Tafwid and see what comes out. There are a huge number of literatures on it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in full control. And yet, within this horizontal level, since we are mukallaf, and we have been given the responsibility, and ultimately we are going to be questioned why we did this or the other, ikhtiyar has to be there. And that's why We see now the concept of aql, human intellect, the guidance and revelation from outside to clarify the position so we make choices wisely and cautiously. We don't suffer the consequences in the hereafter. I'm going to stop here just about, although it's a few more minutes, but I don't want to stretch it. I'm sure that Maulana Hazari will have a few more minutes time to dwell on this topic. But one thing I would like to bring to the attention of everyone, Brother Alex at the beginning pointed out, the numbers or the spike regarding COVID-19, various variants of it, is increasing in our state. We are asking everyone, please, for the sake of yourself and the sake of others, continue with the usual protection, hygiene, masks, and everything else, even if you have been vaccinated. Because if you have been vaccinated and you expose yourself to those that may have it, you may not suffer the consequences, but you may take it and pass it to a loved one within the home that has not been vaccinated. And then you will regret the consequence, particularly children and others. So please pay attention. And the only thing we do, we thought that we're going to see the end of it. But we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us and protect everyone and give speedy recovery to those that unfortunately have not been as fortunate and they are suffering. Thank you very much. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Ahsant, thank you very much, Maulana. Now we will be moving on to our next speaker, the respected Sheikh Mehdi Hazari. Please help me welcome him with a loud salawat. Allahumma salli.
على حب فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد. لتعجيل فرج الإمام صاحب العصر والزمان صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. صلى الله عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا رسول الله، وعلى أهل بيتك المعصومين الأبرار الميامين المظلومين المضطهدين. السلام عليك وعلى ولدك المظلوم أبي عبد الله الحسين يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة يا غريب يا مظلوم يا عطشان كربلاء ما خاب والله من تمسك بكم وأمنا من لجأ والتجأ إليكم يا ليتنا فيا ليتنا كنا معكم سادتي فنفوز والله فوزا عظيما. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله الذي خلق 7 سماوات ومن الأرض مثلهن يتنزل الأمر بينهن لتعلموا أن الله على كل شيء قدير وأن الله قد أحاط بكل شيء علما. آمنا بالله. صدق الله العلي العظيم. والسلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. It's related that on the way to Karbala, at a place known as Zarrud, 2 men from the tribe of Bani Asad, they describe that they had done Hajj, they had completed doing the Hajj, and knowing that Imam Hussein several days prior to that had already left Mecca, because he left Mecca on the 8th of Dhul Hijj, on Yawm al-Tarwiyah. So knowing that Imam Hussein had left already, was going up through the desert, they said, these 2 men relate, that they did the pilgrimage. As soon as they finished Hajj, they quickly started to follow Imam Hussein. They said, our desire was to catch up with Imam Hussein. In Zarrud, as they reached Zarrud, they saw Imam Hussein had encamped in a place. And they said, as we were coming up, we noticed that there was another man who was sort of passing through or traveling through that area. And it looked like he was keeping his distance from Al-Hussein ibn Ali. So much so that they relate, these 2 men, that we saw the man, as Imam Hussein saw him traveling through, Imam Hussein was walking towards him to try to speak to him, and the man intentionally sort of diverted his path and moved away from Imam Hussein, intentionally avoiding Imam Hussein. So these 2 men of the Bani Asad, they say, we saw this as quite strange. And so we went to him as he had walked away a little, because Imam Hussein noticed that the man was avoiding him. Imam Hussein turned around, went back to his camp. They said, we went to this man and we spoke to him. We said, what is your name? Where are you from? He told us that he is from Kufa, and it turns out he's from the same tribe as us. He's from the Banu Asad. So we asked him, what is your state? We just saw you come through. It looked like Al-Hussein was coming to speak to you and you walked away. You intentionally avoided him. He said, what can I tell you? He said, I was in Kufa the whole time, knowing full well that the letters had been written from the people of Kufa to call Imam Hussein to come up to Kufa, to pledge their support, to help him, to stand by him. And I stayed in Kufa until I saw the bodies of Muslim ibn Aqil and Hani ibn Urwa hanging by their legs from the wall. He says, it was at that point that I left Kufa and I decided there is no place for me here, nor is there any cause to support Al-Hussein ibn Ali. And having said that, he says, I bid you farewell, and he leaves. These 2 men of the Banu Asad, they said, we wanted, now hearing what had happened, we wanted to go tell Al-Hussein. So they said, we got to Al-Imam Al-Hussein, we bid him salam. We said, look, we have been following you ever since we left Mecca. And this man who was traveling through this area, who you seem to be wanting to talk to, who ignored you, he has come and told us that the state in Kufa is very bad. That the people there, they are not going to support you. They have pledged, but there is no support for you there, Yabna Rasulillah. They have seen the killing of Muslim ibn Aqil, Hani ibn Urwa. Turn around, Yabna Rasulillah, don't go there. Don't go there. Al-Imam al-Hussein, he says, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. He thanked them immediately for their sort of openness, their counsel. But he says, our destiny lies in that direction. Why? Because we must find out whether truly there is support or not. But the reason I bring up this event, and there are many such events on the way to Karbala, strangely enough, that you wonder and you ask the question, why these people make the decisions they do. This man who avoided Imam Hussein, why did he do so? Why did he intentionally stay away? Obviously, he knew who Imam Hussein was. And I think I've been posing this question to you over and over again, that the choices we make, why are we making those choices? And have we considered every aspect of our being, our lives, the circumstances in which we live that determine those choices? And I think that's an important thing to consider. Because in Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made human beings different. He says in the Holy Quran, إِنَّا عَرَضْنَا الْأَمَانَةَ عَلَى السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَالْجِبَالِ فَأَبَيْنَا أَنْ يَحْمِلْنَهَا وَأَشْفَقْنَا مِنْهَا. Allah says, we presented the trust to the earth, the skies, and the mountains. We presented this trust to them. Choose it. They refused. The earth, the skies, and the mountains, they refused. فَأَبَيْنَا أَنْ يَحْمِلْنَهَا. They said, we cannot carry this trust. وَأَشْفَقْنَا مِنْهَا. They said, this is too much of a burden for us to carry it. Now, what is this trust, this amana that Allah gave? Well, the mufassirin, the exegetes of the Quran, they say, well, this is to worship Allah with reasoning, to have choice to worship. The skies, the earth, and the mountains, they said, no, Ya Allah, compel us, we will worship you. Angels are the same. Angels have no choice in the matter. They are going to worship God. They're not going to choose to worship or not worship. It is in their fitrah, their nature, that they must worship. They have no choice. And the same with the skies, the earth, and the mountains. Because the burden of having to choose it is very hard. وَحَمَلَهَا الْإِنسَانِ. The ayah, it says, insan came along, human beings came along and said, no, we will carry that burden. We will worship God using our minds and our reasoning. And we will choose to do so. And what does the ayah say? إِنَّهُ كَانَ ظَلُومًا جَهُولًا. Insan did indeed say, yes, we will carry the burden. We will worship God with our minds. We will choose this path of salvation for ourselves. Why? Because when you choose for yourself, your potential to rise higher is much more than someone who is compelled, is it not? When you force someone to do something, is it the same when they do it versus when you teach them the value of it, or they see it for themselves and they mentally go and engage in that activity? Obviously, the answer is clear. It's very clear. In the same way, insan has been given choice. Why? Because we have reasoning. And the thing we need to be aware of is that you are also going to be liable to commit oppression, and you're going to be ignorant. You will do dhulm, and you will have jahl. These two things are something we have to consider. And we have to consider it. Why? Because we sometimes think that the choice that we have to make is black and white and easy. And sometimes it is. If you have halal and haram in front of you, the choice is easy. There's no question, all right? You've got a burger. Man, I always come back to the burgers, and that's why I love Dearborn. There's like a burger shop on every corner. You have a burger with a strip of bacon on it, not halal bacon, the haram type of bacon. And then you've got a burger that's halal, dhabiha, no bacon, nothing like that. Choice is easy, right? You would think a choice like that is easy, black and white. And yes, for all intents and purposes, it is easy. But in life, you are faced with a barrage of choices. Believe me, are you not? The most apparent ones, the explicit ones, are easy to deal with. But there are choices that come to your face that you don't even realize you are making the choice. and you make a decision and you enact that decision, and sometimes you haven't realized even the consequences by which you made the decision, isn't it? So it's no longer black and white. You would think that it is. Let me give you kind of a nice example. You all know that in the story of Musa alayhi salam, when he left Egypt and ran and fled the tyranny of Fir'aun, you know that he got to the sea, split the sea, and got through the sea, and what happened to Fir'aun? Fir'aun came into the sea, water came crashing down on him, his body came out of the water, and he became an example for all people that do not ever think that God's justice is never going to touch you. You are not immune, nobody is immune. So now Musa alayhi salam, the Bani Israel, we're talking now not just maybe 100 people, a few thousand people. The riwayat, they say hundreds of thousands of people. This is all of Bani Israel who have escaped Egypt finally. Hundreds and thousands of people. Lots and lots of people who are with Musa alayhi salam, with Harun alayhi salam. They've crossed the sea, and their main antagonist, Fir'aun, is dead. So what do? Musa alayhi salam, he calls some of his trusty people. He says, look, these are soldiers mainly, young men. He says, take some horses, go back to Egypt. Go back to where we came from. Fir'aun is dead. This man has been pillaging us, robbing from us, taking our property from us. Go back on your horses, and all that gold, silver, jewels, everything that has been taken from us, go get it from his coffers. Bring it back. Bring all of that back. The gold particularly. So they go. You know the story. They go through the desert. They stop in a place. Allah's word comes down that, oh Musa, come up to Tur Sinai. Come up to to Mount Sinai to meet with us. Now you know that Musa alayhi salam, at first, he has 7,000 people who want to come with him. He cuts that down to 700, cuts that down to 70. Approximately 70 people go with him all the way up to Mount Sinai. They climb up, they race to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As they go up there, you know, he spends 40 nights, 40 days, 40 nights, comes back down. As he comes back down, he approaches the community. This community, now what is the foundation of it? He has established religion for them, has he not? He's a prophet, he's a messenger. What he taught them was the oneness of God, to believe in the code of Allah, the code of the religion of God. All of that has been established. And more so, he said, if you believe in this God and put your trust in him, he will save you. He will give you security. And what happened? Indeed, Allah split the sea. They walked through, and Fir'aun, the one who was persecuting them, tyrannizing them, he died. Allah saved them. So was the promise not fulfilled? Absolutely, it was fulfilled. So now, Musa alayhi salam goes. It's expected that these people who now believed in God seemingly, right, who have been saved, God saved them, that should have been assigned to them, will be believers, sound in their belief. When he comes back, what does he see? He sees that there's a golden calf, right? You all know the story. There's a golden calf, and they're worshiping the golden calf. Now, how did this happen? How did this suddenly happen, that they're worshiping the golden calf? The Quran, it gives the ayah. And I want you now just to pay attention to what the words of the Quran tell us and explain to us and reveal to us about human decision-making and choice. Quran says that these men, when Prophet Musa came back and asked the people there that I left you, Harun was supposed to be, he's my deputy in this nation. You believed in God, you should have followed in the code that I left with you, and now you're worshiping a golden calf? What happened? The ayah, it says, قَالُوا مَا أَخْلَفْنَا مَوْعِدَكَ بِمَلْكِنَا وَلَكِنَّا حُمِّلَّ أَوْزَارًا مِنْ زِينَةِ الْقَوْمِ وَلَكِنَّا حُمِّلْنَا أَوْزَارًا مِنْ زِينَةِ الْقَوْمِ فَقَذَفْنَاهَا فَكَذَلِكَ أَلْقَى السَّامِرِيُّ. The answer they give to Musa is that it was not our free will to disobey you. This is what they say. قَالُوا مَا أَخْلَفْنَا مَوْعِدَكَ بِمَلْكِنَا. We didn't intend, it was not our free will to disobey you, O Musa. However, what happened? وَلَكِنَّا حُمِّلْنَا أَوْزَارًا مِنْ زِينَةِ الْقَوْمِ. we were burdened by that gold that had been brought by the soldiers who you had sent back to Egypt. All that gold that had come back, we became burdened by it. We became burdened on it. فَقَذَفْنَاهَا. We took it, we threw it in the fire. We took it and we threw it in the fire, all of that gold. And what happened as a consequence of us throwing the gold in the fire? Samiri came, took the gold out that was melting away, made it in the shape of a calf, and here we are worshiping the calf. Convenient, no? So convenient. We knew what we had to do. We were burdened by the gold that was sitting there, so we threw it in the fire, and then what happened? Samiri took advantage. Indeed, he took advantage. He went in, pulled out the gold, made it into a calf, and here we are worshiping the calf. What does this tell you about the nature of insan? Did they not know what they were doing? They knew. They knew what was true, what was not. They knew what was belief, what was not belief. They knew what they had to do in life. Yet what did they not consider? The effect of the gold? Well, no, in this case they said it was the gold. But maybe they misestimated the effect of the gold. Or it was an easy, convenient thing to blame the gold and say the gold was there, that had an influence on us. And they blamed Samiri. Indeed, Samiri had some role in it. But the point I'm trying to make to you is the decision that to you and me may be black and white, that how are you going to worship a gold calf, maybe to them was not so black and white. Why? Because they didn't address the things that were shaping their mind, that was waking up the weakness inside of them, that causing them to become susceptible to shaitan. In the same manner, we are that way. Our decision-making process is not as simple as you would think it is. When we decide something, it's not always as black and white as you might think it is. Human beings make decisions based on what? It's on attaining something that is pleasurable to them, right? Pleasing to you. Why else do you choose something? You're not going to go and take something that doesn't please you. You're going to seek something that is pleasurable. And even that is done with certain criteria. So let's say you have a choice, all right? Let's say you have a choice of eating a hamburger now. All right, back to the example of, let's go to kanafas. We've done enough hamburger. You have the opportunity to eat a kanafa now or wait for 20 years to eat the kanafa. What are you going to do? You'll eat the kanafa now, because in 20 years, you don't know if kanafas even will exist on the face of the earth, right? Same thing with anything. You have opportunity to get gratification now versus getting it later. What are you going to do? You will take gratification now. You're not going to wait for it to come later. It's in front of your eye now. You see it now. You touch it now. What's the guarantee that it is going to come later on? So that's one way in which we make a decision. We see something that is gratifying to us, that makes us happy, and it's pleasing to us. It's available now. We grab it. We don't take a chance on it. The chance that it may be pulled away. That's one thing. Number two is that there are some things that we acquire that we know versus some things that we don't know. And that is extremely important. If you have the choice between choosing something that you know about, that is a known quantity, versus something that you don't know, that is undefined to you, which one are you going to choose? Yes, there's a little excitement in going after things that are uncertain. There's a thrill to going after the unknown. But in this case, that's not what suits life, really. You want something that is a known quantity. You will choose always something that is known. And something that's not known to you, you will do what to it? You'll push it to the side. You won't touch it. So that's another thing that determines our decision-making process. In addition to that, they show, psychological studies, and I am by no means a psychologist, demonstrate that there are two other modalities that determine the decision-making process, and I'm overly simplifying, that sort of determine how a person decides what they are going to do or not do. One of those things is your identity, maintaining your identity. You will always make a decision based on what is best for your identity, right? You are a Muslim, you will only choose halal. You are a Muslim, you will never do haram. You are from Lebanon, so you will prefer to eat Lebanese food. You are from India like me, you will prefer to eat Indian food, although I like a lot of Lebanese as well. You prefer soccer over football, you'll play soccer, etc. You understand my meaning? It's your identity, you will choose that for yourself. The other thing, the other modality that you're trying to choose is what will help you advance, what will improve your state. So once your identity is preserved, every other decision you are making is about what? It's about improving your situation. I have the choice between two jobs. I will choose the job that advances me forward. I have the choice between living in neighborhood X versus neighborhood Y. Neighborhood Y is safer. I will choose neighborhood Y. Why? Because in the future, it provides me with greater security. These are all the things that decide our choices. If you think about your life and every choice you make, they will be encompassed by these things, by these very, very conditions that are in your life. But now the question is, are we sometimes choosing and asking for things that we don't even realize that we are being influenced before we make the choice? And I'll tell you this, that I would like to think of myself as the master of my own fate, right? That no one's going to choose for me, and by no means am I someone's patsy. Nobody is going to tell me what to do. No one's going to influence the things that I do, and that every decision I make, it is made with absolute and total deliberateness. And that's why the Quran warns, because the Quran and Allah, they tell us that you could not be more wrong. The ayah, it says, وَيَدْعُ الْإِنسَانُ بِالشَّرِّ دُعَاءَهُ بِالْخَيْرِ وَكَانَ الْإِنسَانُ جَهُولًا. Allah says, humanity, human beings, they supplicate and they ask for shar, for evil, in the same manner that they are asking for goodness. In the same manner. That's why we must consider this. That وَيَدْعُ الْإِنسَانُ بِالشَّرِّ دُعَاءَهُ بِالْخَيْرِ وَكَانَ الْإِنسَانُ عَجُولًا. Insan is racing forward to make these decisions, not realizing. And that's why Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, what does he say? He says, know the path of your own salvation. And this is a really beautiful quotation. He says, know the path of your salvation, the path that you are living on that's going to lead you to success. Why, Ibn Rasulillah? Because, he says, maybe you will ask for something that will take you off of that path. If you don't know the path, you don't know what's required to be on the path, then you may ask for something that will drop you off of that path. And you do so not knowing. Hastily, you're rushing into it. And realize those things that influence your decision-making process. So let me come to it. In our lives, Iman develops, and we use it as the guide for what we choose, isn't it? Your faith, your aqeedah, what you believe to be morally correct, and you stay away from those things that are ethically and morally wrong. You follow the seerah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. You live by salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Salawat ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. But other than that, do you think there are those things that influence your choices? So there is a phenomenon known as noise. I'm not talking about banging and shouting and jackhammers hitting the concrete pavement. Noise as in those things that increase the variability of your decision making. This concept was introduced, it's an interesting concept, when they decided to look at business practices. When you have, let's say, an insurance company, okay, and they want to determine the risk of a given person for, let's say, car insurance or renter's insurance or health insurance or something like that. They looked at different analysts in a single insurance company. They gave them the same candidate, the same client, and they had them rank the person and do their analysis. How close do you think their analyses were? Not close at all. Each person, even though they were rating the same client, the same prospective person who wants the insurance, each individual analyst had a different ranking. They all were trained in the same manner. They all were working at the same company. The same standards were being applied for the company they're working for, but each came up with a different answer. This creates variability. Why? Because if one gives too much coverage, then the company will lose money. Otherwise, if the other one doesn't give enough coverage, maybe that person will go to another company, to another insurance company. So these businesses were worried about this, that how can this happen? In the same way, they looked at doctors, pathologists, and what they did was they took the same biopsy picture, slice of a tissue from somewhere in the body where some disease is occurring that had to be scored in some manner, and they gave it to different pathologists, the same piece. Do you know how much variability there was amongst them? The correlation between in science you use statistical correlation to see how close the responses are. Do you know how close their responses were? The correlation was 0.61. One being perfect, meaning all of them got the same answer. The correlation was 0.61. That's not good. That one doctor to another doctor to another doctor has so much variability in how they're looking at a piece of tissue to diagnose a disease. Now, does that mean one is trained better than the other? No, the scientists say, no, it's not that way. They're all medical doctors. They've all gone to good medical schools. They've all been trained. They know the fundamentals and the basics. Do you guys get what I'm getting at? You all know what you're supposed to do. You've been trained. You've got the knowledge in your mind. Why? Why is this happening? So they did an interesting study on judges, all right? And I know this is really, I'm thinking back to when I used to sit and listen to majlis, and this is really not the sort of content you hear in majlis, but I apologize. Hopefully it's beneficial. Salawat ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. They did a study on judges, and they looked at their sort of the judgments that they were rendering from the bench. And you know what they found? This is actually a study. They found that on days where the judge's favorite sports team lost, that their judgments were harder. And on days that their sports team won, the judges were giving better judgments, lighter judgments. Same thing goes for some student who's applying to, let's say, college. They were looking at admissions for colleges. They found that on cloudy days, when days are very, very cloudy, admissions committees look more heavily at the academic record of the student. Whereas on sunny days, the admissions committee looks at all the other stuff, the extracurricular activity, your volunteership, how much other stuff you do. Why is that happening? Why does the cloudiness and the weather have anything to do with our decision-making process? Because this is called noise. That's what I mean by noise. And you would seem to think that walking around on a sunny day versus a cloudy day should have no bearing on what you do, should have no impact on your decision-making process. But that's not insan. We are so attuned to everything around us, so affected by us. And again, I come back to the question and sort of the ayah of the Holy Quran, that when Allah says, وَحَمَلَهَا الْإِنسَانِ, insan carried the trust on their shoulder, that I'm going to worship God with my mind. What does that mean? It means that I have availed myself to every sense that I have to find God. And when I do so in the best way possible, I will rise above the malaika, above the angels. There will be no better worship of God than in that human being. That is the example of Muhammad wa ali Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. But it's almost like it's a catch-22. Because that very thing that makes you a strong, potent worshiper, what can it do? It can create noise. It can create variability. So what do they tell you to do? They say, okay, well, try practicing the same action in various different circumstances, all right? So I would ask you guys, and maybe I have posed this question to you, that you come and you pray in this beautiful musalla. The acoustics are perfect, the lighting, the ambiance, everything is great. Would you come to the mosque and pray in the same manner if you were in the middle of some town in Nebraska, where it was just a single room with fluorescent light bulb flickering on top, no air conditioning, carpets are not like this, it's maybe like a plastic thing on the ground? Would you come in and pray in the same manner? Or would you not? No, there is an effect of this place, no? There is something like that. Would your worship be the same? Who knows? That's the question to ask. In the same way, forget about the worship. Anything you do, anything that you are doing, try to imagine yourself doing it in different circumstances, and then ask yourself, the circumstances that are around me, the conditions that are around me, are they changing and modifying my behavior without me knowing it? Are they doing so, like these judges? And by the way, do you know what happened to the judges? When the researchers went to the judges and showed them the results, the judges didn't like it very much. So the researchers actually said, let's propose an algorithm, a mathematical formula, by which we can reduce all that noise so that the judgments become very similar and very standardized. It didn't last very long. Why? Because humanity wants to know that they're in control. We don't want to be dictated to by a mathematical algorithm. We want to follow our own will. So what do they say you should do when you want to address noise in your life, variability in your life? And again, you may ask the question, well, how does this relate to your topic, that are we really free or are we enslaved? If there is a variable, if there's a factor in your life that is swaying the way you decide or you make a decision or a choice, are you truly free if you don't even know about it, that it's doing it to you? It's mind control and you didn't even know it was happening to you. It's changing you, it's modifying you, and you didn't even know that it's happening. That's why it's so critical. So what do they say? They say try to find unnecessary variability. Look for unnecessary variability in your life. Meaning, extra peripheral things. Let me give you an example. I have the habit of when I come home for lunch, I work 3 miles from my home. I come home for lunch and for salat, but as soon as I come in, I have Alexa. I use an Alexa. Quite useful. I'm like, Alexa, play NPR. Alexa will put on NPR, and while I'm preparing my lunch, I'm listening to NPR. Versus I come home for lunch and I don't play NPR. I don't say, Alexa, turn on. In fact, I come into the house and I quietly make my lunch with no sound, and I start to prepare myself that I have to go stand for prayer, like Imam Ali alayhi salatu wassalam used to do. They would describe that when the adhan would happen, he would become pale, just in anticipation of going to do wudu and preparing for prayers. Meanwhile, what have I done? I've increased noise. I put the radio on, I've got the toaster running, my AC is cranked up because it's in the middle of the summer, 103 degrees in North Carolina, and all of this noise is permeating me like crazy. Is it or isn't it? Now imagine you add the noise of this guy right here, yeah? Imagine how much noise is in this. Flicking through your Instagram pages, and I'm guilty of that myself, flicking through your Facebook and whatever else you use, it's nothing. It's really nothing. And they make a habit of comparing noise to bias. So what's the other thing that jades our decisions? Bias, right? But bias is a conscious feeling you know about. You have this predilection in you that you know about it, and it consciously changes who you are. But noise, you're not aware of it. It's changing you and you don't even know it's changing you. It's affecting your decision-making process and you don't even know. And there's really no way to even develop a formula for it, because the noise that affects me may not affect you. So what's the purpose of this discussion? Personal awareness. My dears, it is up to each one of us to examine our lives to find out where is that noise, and that when I decide on something, have I decided free of any strings, any outside influences? So one is unnecessary variability. Weird, unnecessary noise that permeates my life, any kind of it. And if it's there, is it impacting me somehow? Think about it. The second thing they say, do a noise audit. A noise audit just means from morning till night, from when you wake up till when you go to sleep, count the number of things in your life that are noisy, okay? Noisy, as in absolutely useless stuff going on around you that has no bearing on your life, no true bearing on your. I know we all want to think that Instagram is necessary and Facebook is necessary and my phone is necessary. Believe me, most of you are young. I grew up in a time there was no internet. Forget about cell phones and all of that stuff. And it was a lot quieter then, believe me. So do a noise audit. See how much noise there is. And if you really want to challenge yourself, go ahead and shut your phone off for a week and see what that does to you, right? You'll find your life becomes very different. You may become a bit itchy, actually. The final thing that they describe that you should do is determine whether this noise is something that is long term. Whether it's a noise that just comes and goes once in a while, or that is a persistent presence in your life. Because if it is a persistent presence in your life, what's the chance of happening? It's going to have a long-term ramification on your sensibilities and on your decision-making process. And that's why you see that the lives of the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim as-salatu was-salam was what? Stripped down to its barest minimum. Not the highest forms of food, clothing, shelter. Imam Ali alayhi salam had 2 pieces of clothing. He would wash one and wear the other and alternate. He would eat a dry piece of bread. And why do I come to this topic? And I hope you sort of are seeing the concept of noise. Because when it comes to religion, we have to be ultimately aware, deeply aware of what is around us. Not just consciously, but unconsciously. You want to rise in status in front of God? This is the awareness that you have to remove this form of noise that is going to influence your judgment. Days when you come home from work or from school and you are particularly irritable with your family. Why? Because something clicked. There was some noise. And when asked that why are you being like this, so irritable, so intolerant, you'll say, well, I don't know. I've had a normal day. Nothing happened. Did something happen at work? No, nothing happened at work. Day has been normal. So then why is this happening? That's where that noise comes from. That noise has an impact on you. And the relevance of this, particularly when it comes to deen and religion, is very, very, very important. Because all it takes is one little change without you noticing it, and you start to go down the wrong path. You start to slip. And that's why Imam As-Sadiq alayhi salatu was-salam, he says, Ilahi, la taj'al musibati fi dini. Let me have trial and trouble in everything, not in my religion. Never in my religion. Let any trial afflict me, but just not in my religion. So to remove noise, we have to be very concerted, very focused, and realize that our deen has to be preserved. My dear brothers and sisters, in these next few nights, we will change directions, and we will talk about imamat. And so when I talk about noise, and I talk about choice, and I talk about bias as well, in particular in relation to this, what I'm just going to say right now, consider the ummah after the demise of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. That when Rasulullah died and Saqifat Banu Sa'ida took place, they gathered in that barn, that little house, to decide. Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib is washing the body of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. The Muhajirin have gathered and they are deciding the fate of the ummah, the next leadership, and the Ansar are trying to join them because they were left out of the discussion. They weren't told, so they come and they join in. The decisions that were made then were made how? They were made by individuals. How were the decisions going to be made about who is going to be the next leader? By an individual, a group of individuals, isn't it? The first was chosen by a group of individuals. The second was chosen by one individual. The third was chosen by a group of individuals. So the question becomes, why is their decision-making process free from noise? And what makes it the right decision? I'm just asking a question. And so when you consider it, what would be the right choice? The choice of individuals who are going to make a decision summarily, without any standard, without any ordered, let's not even consider bias in this case, or when you say in the Holy Quran, وَمَا يَنْطِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ. Rasulullah does not speak anything that is in vain or anything that is without purpose. He speaks only the inspiration given to him by Allah. And so when he holds up the hand of Ali ibn Abi Talib and he says, مَنْ كُنْتُ مَوْلَاهُ فَهَذَا عَلِيٌّ مَوْلَاهُ. Who is speaking now? Who is the one directing the message forward? That is no one other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when you consider what it means to have noise in your life, consider your religion to be the most crucial. In those days, in the days of Imam Abi Abdullah al-Husayn alayhi salatu was-salam, when Imam Hussein came up and finally arrived in Karbala, they say that in the last days before Karbala, before the day of Ashura took place, that Umar ibn Sa'ad la'natullahi alayh, what did he do? he called some of the men of Kufa and he says, I want you to take this letter to Al-Hussein and wait there until you get an answer and bring it back. Take the letter. The letter said, Hussein, you are obliged to either pledge allegiance to give bay'ah to Yazid, or we will take you to task. We cannot allow you. There's no choice for you other than this. Umar ibn Sa'ad goes from one Kufan chief to another, one man of Kufa to another. All of them say no. All of them say no. They don't want to go. They don't want to go. Finally, Umar ibn Sa'ad comes and asks one of his men, I'm asking them to deliver a message. They're not going out to fight in battle. Why are they not willing to go? The answer comes to Umar ibn Sa'ad that these are the very people who sent letters to Al-Hussein inviting him to come up to Kufa. With what face are they going to face the master of the youth of paradise now? Finally, they say a man named Kathir ibn Abdullah. Al-Kathir ibn Abdullah, he was sort of a brash man in Kufa. He was known. He was sort of recklessly brave, but violent and aggressive. He said, I'll take it. And he says, not only will I take the letter for you, Umar ibn Sa'ad, but I will take my sword and I will kill Al-Hussein right there and then. Umar ibn Sa'ad, he says, no, I didn't tell you to do that. He says, just take the letter and bring it back. Al-Kathir ibn Abdullah, he takes the letter, he starts to advance towards the camp of Imam al-Hussein. As he starts to get close, they say, Habib ibn Madahir. We are in the night of Habib ibn Madahir tonight. He comes to Imam al-Hussein. He says, Yabna Rasulillah, do you know this man who is coming? Imam Hussein, he says, no, Habib, who is this? Habib ibn Madahir, who is from Kufa, he says, I know him. He is very reckless, he's aggressive, he is not to be trusted. Will you allow me to go meet him before I allow him to come forward? Imam Hussein says, go, Habib. Habib ibn Madahir, he goes forward. He tells Kathir ibn Abdullah to stop. He says, stop right there. Don't move any forward. He says, the only way I'm going to allow you to go forward is if you drop your sword, leave it here, come unarmed, do what you have to do, deliver your message to Al-Imam Abi Abdullah al-Hussein, then you can go back. Otherwise, you cannot take your sword. The man, he says, no, I will never relinquish my sword. There's no chance. So Habib ibn Madahir, he says, okay, you give me the letter, tell me what you want to deliver, what message, I will take it, and then I will bring it back to you, but you cannot advance forward past this point. The man, he says, no, I will not give you the letter either. Habib ibn Madahir, he says, then your choice is made for you, you must go back. I will not allow you forward. He goes back. He gives the word to Umar ibn Sa'ad that, look, I tried, they wouldn't let me go forward. Umar ibn Sa'ad, he says, is there anybody who can take this letter to Al-Hussein? They say, finally, a man named Qurra ibn al-Qais al-Handali. Qurra ibn Qais al-Handali comes forward, another one of the prominent chiefs of Kufa. He says, I will take it. I will take it. He takes the letter unarmed, comes forward, and as he's coming forward, Habib ibn Madahir is still standing with Al-Imam al-Hussein. He says, Yabna Rasulillah, they have sent another man. I know this man as well. He is honorable. He's trustworthy. He's somebody whose word can be counted on. Will you allow me to go speak to him to see what he wants? Imam Hussein, he says, go, Habib. Habib ibn Madahir, he comes forward. He stops in front of Qurra ibn Qais al-Handali. He says, my friend, I see you. Which side you have chosen? Why are you here? He says, I have come to deliver this letter and to take back the answer for that letter. Habib says, wait here. He takes the letter, goes to Imam Hussein. You know the story. Imam Hussein reads it. Imam Hussein, he says, we will not give bay'ah to Yazid. A man like me does not give bay'ah to a man like Yazid. Tell them to go and take that message back to Umar ibn Sa'ad. Habib ibn Madahir, he comes to him. And he says to Qurra ibn Qais, he says, this is the answer of Al-Hussein. Take it back to Umar ibn Sa'ad. As Qurra ibn Qais is turning to go back, Habib says, stop, my friend. He says, have you considered where you have stationed yourself? Who you have aligned yourself with? He says, think about where you are and where is the grandson of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Think about that. And come join the side of Al-Hussein. Leave the side of evil and despotism and come and join the side of truth and justice on the side of Al-Hussein. Qurra ibn Qais, he looks at Habib ibn Madahir and he says to him, my friend, I will go back and I will think on it. This is what he says. And again, I hope you realize the weight of something like this. Do you know where Qurra ibn Qais ends up? He stays on the side of Umar ibn Sa'd. And he is one of the men who, after the Battle of Karbala, he relates that I saw Zainab on the body of Al-Hussein. I saw Zainab on the body of it. He's standing and relating the fact that I chose the side of darkness rather than the side of light. I saw Zainab al-Kubra see the body of Al-Hussein and say, Wa Muhammada salla alayka malaikatu sama. I heard those words from her. Hada Husaynun murammalan biddima. Here is Hussein drenched in his own blood. What made him make this choice? What caused him to choose this destiny? Did he not know what he was looking at or who he was beholding in front of him, the side that he was on? Or maybe, as we have just spoken about, he didn't consider all the forces that decide our decision-making process. And that just having that, maybe that little bit of good intention in you is not enough. You need resolve, clarity, and absolute deliberateness to carry that good intention forward. And in fact, carrying it forward is even harder, because you're going to find that the forces that try to knock you off of the path are going to be even more difficult. When the day of Ashura arrived, you all know that one by one the companions started to prepare to go out. And they say wave after wave of assault came, wave after wave of spears and arrows. One of the young men who was there was a Turkish slave, young Turkish boy. And you already know about John, Mawla Aba Dhar, John, who was the attendant of Aba Dhar. There are many stories like this, but there was a young Turkish boy who took permission from Imam Hussein and went out to fight. And when he fought and was overcome by injury, struck, he fell. And when he fell, he called, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah, calling out to Imam Hussein. They say Imam Hussein, the Arbab al-Maqatil, they say Imam Hussein got to him. Now I ask you to close your eyes and imagine this moment. This young boy is lying on the ground, breathing his last breaths. Imam Hussein comes to him, sees him. He puts his cheek on the cheek of this young boy and begins to weep. Imam Hussein puts his cheek on the cheek of this young boy. My dear brothers and sisters, when someone dies, what do you do before burying them? You're sad, you're sorrowful, you put your face on their face because this is your beloved. Imam Hussein puts his cheek on the cheek of this young Turkish boy. They say this Turkish boy opens his eyes and he says, how lucky am I? How lucky am I that the grandson of Rasulullah has placed his cheek on mine. This was the valor of all of the companions of Al-Imam al-Hussein. One by one, they went out to the battlefield, fighting against the enemy soldiers. Nafi' ibn Hilal, they describe Nafi' ibn Hilal. He used to write his name on the arrows that he shot, and with each one, he will shout out, declaring that he is standing by the grandson of Rasulullah. Just like him, there were men like Umar ibn Quradha al-Ansari. Umar ibn Quradha al-Ansari, his father was a companion of Rasulullah, and his brother, unfortunately, was on the side of the enemy. They say that when the enemy soldiers launched their arrows at the camp of Al-Imam al-Hussein, Umar ibn Quradha stepped in front of Al-Imam al-Hussein, taking the arrows on his chest. It's described in the history that if Imam al-Hussein moved to the right, Umar ibn Qurada shadowed him and moved to the right. If Imam Hussein moved to the left, Umar ibn Qurada moved to the left. Finally overcome by the arrows that have pierced his body, collapsing to the ground, they say that Imam Hussein comes to the body of Umar ibn Qurada. He weeps on his companion, and they say that Umar ibn Qurada opens his eyes. He says, Ya ibn Rasulillah, have I fulfilled my trust? Have I fulfilled my responsibility to you? What is Imam Hussein going to say? Every time that he would come to pick up a body of one of his companions, he would recite the ayah, فَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ قَضَى نَحْبَهُ وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ يَنْتَظِرُ وَمَا بَدَّلُوا تَبْدِيلًا. He repeats it over and over, that there are those who have given their lives and have been martyred. There are those who are still waiting to take their turn, and yet they have never ever moved off of the course that was chosen. My dear brothers and sisters, in the assault of the enemy upon the camp of Imam Hussein, one of the wings that was coming to face the army of Umar ibn Sa'ad, they say that Muslim ibn Awsaja is one of those men who is leading the charge. He is one of the oldest members of the encampment, of the garrison of the soldiers of Imam Hussein. They say the enemy soldiers mock him because of his age. However, Muslim ibn Awsaja vanquishes the enemy soldiers. However, he is struck by the arrows, the spears and the strikes of the sword. Falling to the ground, he says, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah, alayka minni akhir as-salam. My last salam upon you, O grandson of Rasulullah. Imam Hussein rides out to where Muslim ibn Awsaja is located. Coming there with Habib ibn Madahir, they come upon the body of Muslim. Habib ibn Madahir, he says, O Muslim, I would ask you to give me your final testimony before you depart from here and go to Jannah. However, I know that very soon I will be following you. They say that Muslim ibn Awsaja, he says to Habib ibn Madahir, أوصيك بهذا أن تموت دونه وأشار إلى الحسين. They say that Muslim ibn Awsaja says to Habib that my will and testament to you, or my directive to you, is to die protecting al-Hussein, pointing to al-Imam al-Hussein. They carry the body of Muslim ibn Awsaja back to the encampment, back to the camp. Zuhair ibn al-Qayn, Burayr ibn Khudair, one after one, they keep going out to the battlefield. Abis ibn Shabib, Shawdab, and others are fighting in the battlefield. They say that one of the dearest, most loyal companions of Imam al-Hussein had come to him from Kufa. Imam Hussein had been waiting for him in the encampment, waiting for him to join. When that rider had approached on the days before Karbala, the days before Ashura, the people, they asked, who is that? Imam Hussein, he said, this is no one other than Habib ibn Madahir. Habib ibn Madahir, he comes, bids salam to Imam al-Hussein. He says to Imam al-Hussein, Sayyidi ya Aba Abdullah, do you give me permission to go and say salam to the daughters of Rasulullah? Imam Hussein, he says, go. Habib ibn Madahir goes to the tent where Al-Aqila Zainab is located, standing outside of the door with his head bent down. He says, Assalamu alaykunna ya banati Rasulillah. May the salam of Allah be upon you, O daughters daughters of Rasulullah. From inside, the voice of Al-Hawra Al-Aqila Zainab comes. Assalamu alayka ya Habib. Salam upon you, O Habib. Habib, he says, how soon it is that we will be faced with tragedy, and may Allah protect the daughters of Rasulullah. Habib ibn Madahir goes out to fight the enemy on the day of Ashura, striking them from every side. The history described that he vanquished many of the enemy soldiers, but in the process took hit upon hit, strike of sword and spear, until finally they say he fell to the ground. He kept trying to get up to resume the battle. The enemy soldier stepped forward and struck him from behind. Habib ibn Madahir fell to the ground. Another soldier came and struck him from the other side. Finally, they severed the head of Habib ibn Madahir. My dear brothers and sisters, Imam Hussein would pick up the bodies one by one, bringing them back. But it is related that the head of Habib ibn Madahir was tied with a rope and then tied to the end of a horse. A soldier, after the events of Ashura, dragged the head of Habib ibn Madahir in the sand, dragging it all the way back to Kufa as the prisoners were being led. When this soldier entered the city of Kufa, the head still dragging in the sand, all the children ran from the street. Soldiers are approaching, the people ran away, the children ran away. They say in the Arbab al-Maqatil, one little boy kept racing behind the soldier, kept looking at the head that was being pulled in the sand. The soldier, he turned around and he said, Ya bunay, oh son, what is wrong with you? Why do you look at this head? The little boy, he says, there is nothing, leave me alone, let me be. He kept going and pulling the head in the sand. The little boy kept chasing after the horse, looking at the head. Finally, the enemy soldier got down from his horse, came walking towards the boy, and now he says, Ya bunay, he says, my son, why? Tell me now, why are you following me around? The little boy, he raised his head to the cursed soldier. He said to him, هذا رأس والدي حبيب ibn Madahir. This is the head of my father, Habib ibn Madahir. أفطعتني حتى أدفنا. Will you not give it to me so I can bury the head of Habib ibn Madahir? وسيعلم الذين ظلموا آل محمد أي منقلب ينقلبون والعاقبة للمتقين. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم يا الله. اللهم إنا نسألك وندعوك ونقسم عليك بحق الزهراء وأبيها وبعلها وبنيها والسر المستودع فيها لعن الله ظالميها. اللهم شافي كل مريض، اللهم رد كل غريب، اللهم فك كل أسير، اللهم غير سوء حالنا بحسن حالك يا كريم. اللهم وفقنا لمراضيك وجنبنا معاصيك وثبت أقدامنا على صراطك المستقيم وخذ بأيدينا إليك يا أرحم الراحمين. وفرج عنا يا الله فرجا عاجلا قريبا كلمح البصر وهو أقرب من ذلك. وافرغ علينا صبرا وتوفنا مسلمين. والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين.
دعاء الحجة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين صلوات. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. Ahsan Sheikhna, thank you all for joining us tonight. Inshallah, you all benefited from the program. We'll see you all again tomorrow at 9:30 p.m. Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
ما قصرت والله.